You know, I am watching these two gentlemen on the same screen, and I cannot help but think that how strange this is. You've got Daniel Hakikochi, a man who openly defends child marriage, running to Paul Williams for backup. And Paul Williams, a Muslim, is, wait for it, running to Catholic scholar to save him from Islamic dilemma. Strange chain of defense there. So let's get this straight, okay? So you've got leading defender of pedophilia in the Muslim apologetic world, leaning on homosexual Muslim, who then leans on Catholic academics to try to protect Islam from one of the simplest argument out there. Strange friendship. Very, very strange things are happening behind the scenes.
This is a great book that I recommend called The Bible in Arabic by Sidney H. Griffith, The Scriptures of the People of the Book in the Language of Islam. Now, he's another of these non-Muslims, and he's a professor at the Catholic University of America. The back cover's got major reviews, very positive reviews, people from Yale University and others. He's a top scholar in the field, specialist in early Islam and its attitude towards Christianity. And he says in this book on page 58, I'll just read just a brief paragraph to give you a flavor of his attitude. And then we'll come to what the scholars in general in the West are saying. Is it any different, or is it merely more this same perspective that Sidney Griffiths offers? He says, the Quran, following both the then current Jewish and Christian view, recognizes the Torah as the scripture God sent down to Moses. He wrote for them in the tablets about everything. This is Surah number 7, 145. The gospel that the Quran confirms is not the gospel as Christians recognized it in the Quran's own day. Rather, following the model of its own distinctive prophetology, the Quran speaks of the gospel as a scripture God gave to Jesus. We gave him the gospel, wherein is light and guidance, confirming what he had before him of the Torah. It's in the 5th surah. Here, as in other instances we have noted in the previous chapter, the Quran apparently intends to criticize and correct what it regards as a mistaken Christian view of the Christian's own principal scripture. So just put this in plainer English. For the Quran, the gospel is given to Jesus. It's called the Injil in Arabic. It is not the New Testament. It's not the 27 books of the Christian canon that were put together centuries after Jesus. That's not what the Quran calls the gospel. This is a really important point. Again, cutting against David Wood's claim that the Quran confirms the Bible, the 27 books of the New Testament, and however many books of the Old Testament, depending on which denomination you belong to. And then Griffiths continues, what is more, by the time of its collection, and principally in criticism of the behavior of the people of the book, in other words, the Christians, in regard to their scriptures and the Jews, the Quran is already speaking of the distortion and alteration of scriptural texts. This is to be found in the very passages, and he quotes passages you quote in the debate, that in subsequent Islamic tradition will undergird the doctrine of the corruption of the earlier scriptures, a development that would effectively discount the testimonies drawn by Jews or Christians from their scriptures in behalf of the verisimilitude of their teachings. Very fancy way of putting it. But in other words, he's affirming the idea here, which you obviously argued for, that the Quran does speak of the actual alteration and of the scriptures themselves, the distortion themselves, not any other conception. So that a top American expert, non-Muslim, on this subject.
Now, hear what Paul Williams does. He uses Sidney Griffith, a big Catholic scholar, and says, see, the Quran doesn't say confirming the Bible Christians had in Muhammad's day. It only confirms some heavenly angel given to Jesus that nobody has. Therefore, David Wood is wrong, and Muslims don't have this problem. Very lovely, cute baby story there. But here's my problem. Why is it that Christians like David Wood seems to respect Quran, Muhammad, and Hadith more than Muslims like Paul Williams? Paul is appealing to the Catholic professor. David Wood in the debate was appealing to the very words of Allah in the Quran and very words of Muhammad in the Hadith. Why we Christians are using Allah and Muhammad and we are showing more respect to them versus Muslims are running away from Allah and Muhammad and their words as fast as they can. Strange, really strange. Let's look at those words. In Surah 7 verse 157 says, the messenger, the unlettered prophet, whom they find written in the Torah and the gospel that are with them. Not in heaven, not lost in history, with them. That's the Torah and the gospel, physically in the hands of Jews and Christians in the 7th century. That's what Allah is saying. That is exact opposite of Paul Williams' scholar who says nobody has the Injil anymore theory. Think about it. Surah 5 verse 47, again, very word of Allah, according to Muslims. Let the people of the gospel judge by what Allah has revealed therein. How in the world are Christians supposed to judge by a gospel that doesn't exist anymore? Are you saying Allah is commanding them to do something impossible? Or in your mind you are thinking Allah thinks Christians can do something that impossible to do? And then we've got Sunnah Abu Dawud, that Jewish court case. Muhammad is handed physical copy of the Torah. He puts it on a cushion and then says, I believe in you and in him who revealed you. That's not heavenly scroll. That's the Torah they have right there in Medina. Muhammad recognized it as revelation. So let me ask you, Mr. Paul, why are you running to a Catholic scholar? The very people Quran identifies as the worst of creatures, very people you identify as kafir. Why are you running them to tell us that what Quran says when I am running to straight words of Allah and Muhammad's own lips? I know lips of Muhammad is very dangerous. Everyone should keep away from them, as well as people need to keep away their kids from the lips of Muhammad. But I am running straight to Allah's word and Muhammad's own lips. Why are you throwing out your own prophet's testimony? If you really loved Muhammad, you would honor his words instead of explaining them away. And about that corruption thing, Griffith mentions, yes, Quran accuses Jews and Christians of tahrif, distortion. And your scholars tells us that means twisting the meaning, misquoting or hiding the parts. Not that the text has been changed, not that text has gone. The Quran still tells them to judge by what is in their books. So here's the bottom line. The Quran affirms the Torah and the Gospel in the possession of Jews and Christians of Muhammad's day. Muhammad himself honored those physical texts. You can't erase those verses by appealing to the Catholic professor. The Islamic dilemma is still alive and well. And if anything, your own sources makes it worse.